Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the Starship Horizon, watching the massive space station grow larger in the viewport. Crossroads Station was a marvel of engineering, built by dozens of alien species working together. It rotated slowly in the darkness of space, its lights twinkling like stars against the black void. Today would mark the first official meeting between humans and the Galactic Council, and Jake felt the weight of representing his entire species. The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss, and Dr. Lisa Chow walked in carrying a tablet full of notes. She had been studying alien languages and customs for months, preparing for this moment. Behind her came Chef Maria Santos, who had been chosen to prepare a special meal for the diplomatic dinner. Maria carried herself with the confidence of someone who had cooked for presidents and kings, but today she would be cooking for beings from other worlds. "Captain, we're receiving a docking request from the Zephyrian vessel," called out Lieutenant Kate Foster from the communications station. Her voice carried a hint of excitement that she tried to hide behind professional calm. Everyone on the ship knew this was history in the making. Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. "Grant them permission to dock," and signaled the station that we're ready for the diplomatic meeting. The Zephyrian ship was beautiful, made of what looked like living crystal that shifted colors in the starlight. As it approached Crossroads Station, Jake could see smaller ships from other species already docked. The Threx vessels looked like mechanical insects, while the Nalori ships were smooth and flowing like water frozen in time. Each design told a story of the species that built it. An hour later, Jake found himself in the diplomatic hall of Crossroads Station, facing beings he had only seen in photographs and videos. Ambassador Kael'Vath of the Zephyrians stood 7 feet tall, his crystalline skin catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. His voice was like wind chimes when he spoke. "Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome humanity to the greater community of worlds," Kael'Vath said, his large eyes showing what Jake hoped was genuine warmth. "We have watched your species with great interest. Your rapid expansion across your local star systems shows remarkable determination." Jake smiled and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Kael'Vath studied the hand for a moment before reaching out with his own crystalline fingers. The touch was surprisingly warm. "Ambassador, humanity is honored to meet our galactic neighbors," Jake replied. "We look forward to learning from your civilizations and sharing what we have to offer." The formal ceremonies continued for several hours. Jake met representatives from the Threx, whose compound eyes seemed to see everything at once, and the Nalori, who communicated through both sound and color changes in their skin. Each species had their own way of greeting, their own customs, and their own concerns about these new humans. As the day progressed, Jake began to notice something odd. Whenever the conversation turned to certain topics about dangerous creatures or hostile worlds, the aliens would grow quiet and nervous. They spoke in whispers about shadow beasts and void sharks, creatures that seemed to terrify even these advanced civilizations. The diplomatic dinner was held in a grand hall with tables arranged to accommodate the different body types of each species. Maria had worked with the station's food synthesizers to create a meal that would showcase human cuisine while being safe for alien digestion. The main course was her specialty, grilled tentacle steaks from the Kraken-class creatures that lived in the methane seas of Europa. Maria moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, seasoning the meat with herbs from Earth and a sauce she had perfected over years of cooking. The tentacles were massive, each one thick as a human arm, with suction cups that could crush steel. She had hunted these creatures herself during her time as a military chef, learning to respect their intelligence and strength while also understanding how to prepare them properly. "The key to cooking Kraken," Maria explained to her alien observers, "is to understand that these creatures are apex predators in their environment. They're incredibly strong, incredibly smart, and incredibly dangerous. But they're also incredibly delicious when prepared correctly." The alien observers watched in fascination as Maria demonstrated her knife work, cutting through the tough meat with skill that came from years of practice. She explained how humans had learned to hunt these creatures using submersible vehicles. and specialized equipment to track them in their underwater lairs. When the meal was served, Jake noticed the immediate change in the aliens' behavior. Ambassador Kael'Voth stared at his plate with what could only be described as horror. His crystalline features seemed to dim, and his usual melodious voice became tight and strained. "Captain Morrison," Kael'Voth said slowly, "this creature you serve as food. We know of such beings. They are the terror of the deep worlds, the nightmares that keep our children from the water. How is it that humans not only face them, but consume them?" Jake looked around the table and saw similar expressions of shock and disbelief on the faces of every alien representative. The Threx had stopped eating entirely, their compound eyes fixed on the tentacle stakes. The Nilori had turned a deep blue color that Dr. Chang had learned meant extreme distress. "These are Krakens," Jake said, trying to keep his voice casual. "They're challenging to hunt, but Maria here is one of our best chefs. She's prepared them in a traditional Earth style with some modifications for our guests." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake realized that something had gone very wrong, but he had no idea what. The aliens began to excuse themselves one by one, their diplomatic politeness barely covering their obvious distress. Within minutes, the grand dinner had become a disaster, and Jake was left wondering what he had done to drive away humanity's potential allies. As the last alien representative left the hall, Maria approached Jake with a confused expression. "Captain, I don't understand. The meat was perfect? The seasoning was exactly right? What happened?" Jake stared at the abandoned plates of food and realized that humanity's introduction to galactic civilization had just taken a very unexpected turn. Something about their simple dinner had terrified beings from across the galaxy, and he had no idea why. Commander Ben Rodriguez received the emergency communication while he was reviewing supply reports aboard the human embassy ship stationed near Earth's moon. The message came through encrypted channels, marked with the highest priority seal of the Galactic Council. As he read the formal request, his coffee grew cold in his hands. The Council wanted a full hearing about humanity's dietary practices. They wanted explanations, documentation, and most importantly, they wanted assurances that humans were not a threat to galactic peace. Ben had been expecting some kind of response after the diplomatic dinner incident, but this was far more serious than he had imagined. 3 days later, Ben found himself in the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council on their primary world of Nexus Prime. The chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate hundreds of different species. The ceiling stretched so high it was lost in shadows, and the walls were covered with symbols representing every member civilization. Council leader Zarketh of the Threx stood at the central podium, his insectoid features unreadable behind his ceremonial mask. His compound eyes reflected the light from multiple angles as he addressed the assembled representatives. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had led the council for decades. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Zarketh began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages, "we gather today to address a matter of grave concern. The new species calling themselves humans have demonstrated behaviors that require our immediate attention." Ben shifted uncomfortably in his seat as a large holographic display activated above the assembly. Images began to appear, showing various creatures from across the galaxy. Each image was accompanied by testimonies from different species about their encounters with these beings. The first image showed a massive creature covered in dark scales, with eyes that glowed like red stars. Ambassador Veltara of the Nilori stood to address the assembly, her skin shifting to deep purple as she spoke. "This is the shadow beast of Kepler 442b, she said, her voice trembling with remembered fear. "For 3 centuries our colonies on that world lived in terror of these creatures. They hunt in packs, they can phase through solid matter, and they have killed thousands of our people. We abandoned 7 cities because of them." The display shifted to show a human report. Ben watched in growing horror as the assembly read about a human hunting expedition that had successfully tracked and killed 12 shadow beasts for their meat. The report described them as challenging prey and included recipes for preparing their flesh. Zarketh's mandibles clicked together in what Ben had learned was a sign of extreme agitation. The humans not only hunt these creatures but consume them as food. They have turned our nightmares into their meals. The next image showed crystalline spiders the size of houses, their bodies reflecting light like living diamonds. Representative Kothmal of the Ethereal spoke without moving his energy-based form, his thoughts transmitted directly into the minds of the assembled beings. "These are the crystal spiders of Titan," Kothmal communicated. "They weave webs of pure energy that can trap starships. Their bite contains toxins that can kill most known life forms. We have lost entire research teams to these creatures." Again, the display showed human documentation. This time it was a video of human miners working on Titan, casually discussing how they had learned to harvest spider silk for industrial purposes. The humans in the video wore the silk as protective clothing and spoke about spider steaks as if they were discussing the weather. The testimonies continued for hours. Each species presented their most feared creatures, and each time the humans had not only encountered them but had turned them into food sources. The plasma-breathing dragons of the Vega system, the void sharks that could swim through space itself, the metal-eating worms of the asteroid fields. Every creature that had terrorized galactic civilization for millennia was listed in human hunting records. Ben watched as the evidence mounted against his species. He began to understand why the aliens had reacted so strongly to Maria's cooking. To them, humans were not just another species seeking to join galactic civilization. They were beings who actively sought out the most dangerous predators in the galaxy and ate them for dinner. Ambassador Kael'Vath of the Zephyrians rose to speak, his crystalline form catching the light of the assembly hall. "Honored council members," he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "we must ask ourselves what kind of species humanity truly is. Are they simply unusually brave, or are they something far more dangerous?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ben could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him. He had been chosen to speak for humanity, to explain their actions, but how could he make them understand? "Council Leader Zarketh," Ben said as he stood, "I request permission to address the assembly." Zarketh's compound eyes focused on him with unsettling intensity. "The human representative may speak." Ben walked to the speaker's platform, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. He looked out at the assembled beings, representatives of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years longer than humanity. They had built wonders that humans could barely comprehend, yet they lived in fear of creatures that humans considered dinner. "Honored representatives," Ben began, "I understand your concern. From your perspective, humans must seem like monsters who seek out danger for sport. But I ask you to consider another possibility. Perhaps humanity is not uniquely violent or reckless. Perhaps we are simply uniquely adapted to deal with the challenges that other species cannot face." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives seemed intrigued by this perspective, while others appeared even more disturbed. Ben continued, knowing that the future of human-alien relations might depend on his next words. "Every species develops according to their environment," he said. "Your civilizations grew in worlds where intelligence and cooperation were the keys to survival. Humanity developed on a world where we had to compete with creatures that could kill us with claws and teeth. We learned to hunt not because we are evil, but because we had to survive." Ben paused, letting his words sink in. "The creatures you fear are indeed dangerous, but they are not supernatural. They are not unstoppable. They are simply predators, and humanity has thousands of years of experience dealing with predators." The assembly fell silent as Ben concluded his speech. He had said what needed to be said, but he could see that his words had not entirely convinced them. The fear in their eyes remained, and Ben realized that humanity's relationship with the galaxy would never be simple. As the session ended, Ben wondered if humans would ever truly be accepted by these peaceful civilizations, or if they would always be seen as the monsters who ate monsters. Dr. Amy Parker sat in her small research lab aboard the human embassy ship, surrounded by holographic displays showing the brain scans of dozens of different alien species. She had volunteered to study the psychological differences between humans and their galactic neighbors, hoping to understand why the dinner incident had caused such a massive diplomatic crisis. The more she learned, the more she realized how fundamentally different humanity was from every other species in the galaxy. The Zephyrians, she discovered, had evolved from creatures similar to Earth's butterflies. Their ancestors had survived by being beautiful, by blending into their environment, and by avoiding predators through camouflage and speed. Their entire civilization was built around the concept of harmony with nature, not domination over it. When they encountered dangerous creatures, their instinct was to flee or hide, not to fight. The threats had developed from hive insects that survived through collective intelligence and cooperation. Their society was built on the idea that no individual should take unnecessary risks that might endanger the group. They had conquered their world through organization and technology, not through physical confrontation. To them, the idea of deliberately seeking out dangerous creatures was not just foolish but morally wrong. Amy pulled up the psychological profile of the Nalori and found similar patterns. They had evolved from aquatic creatures that survived by living in the deepest parts of their oceans, far from the predators that hunted in shallow waters. Their entire culture was based on the concept of finding safe spaces and staying there. They had developed space travel not to explore, but to escape from the dangers of their homeworld. Every species in the Galactic Council had followed the same basic pattern. They had survived by avoiding danger, by using intelligence to stay safe, by working together to protect their communities. None of them had ever developed the human trait of actively seeking out dangerous situations for food, sport, or simple curiosity. Amy was reviewing the neurological data when Marine Sergeant Paul Young knocked on her lab door. He was a big man, with scarred hands and easy smile, the kind of soldier who had seen combat on a dozen different worlds. Amy had requested to interview him because his personnel file showed extensive experience hunting dangerous creatures across multiple star systems. "Doc, you wanted to see me?" Paul said as he entered the lab. He looked around at the alien brain scans with mild interest, as if studying the minds of other species was perfectly normal. "Yes, Paul, I need to understand something about human hunting behavior," Amy said, activating a recording device. "Can you tell me about your experiences hunting what the aliens call apex predators?" Paul settled into a chair and grinned. "Well, Doc, I wouldn't call them apex predators exactly. Sure, they're dangerous, but so are grizzly bears and nobody calls them supernatural monsters. Take those space bears on Kepler 186f, for example. Big as houses, claws like swords, and they can survive in vacuum for short periods. Scared the hell out of the Nalori colonists." Amy leaned forward, fascinated. "How did you approach hunting them?" "Same way you'd hunt any large predator," Paul said with a shrug. "Study their behavior, learn their patterns, figure out their weaknesses. Space bears are solitary hunters. They mark territory with scent, and they're actually pretty predictable if you know what to look for. We set up observation posts, tracked their movements for weeks, then set traps in their preferred hunting grounds. Weren't you afraid?" Amy asked. Paul looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Afraid? Well, sure, but that's part of the fun. Fear keeps you sharp, makes you think clearly. Besides, these creatures aren't magic. They're just animals, even if they're bigger and stronger than Earth animals. Every animal has weaknesses, every predator has limits." Amy played back a recording of alien testimonies from the council hearing. The creatures Paul described as just animals were the same ones that had driven entire alien civilizations to abandoned planets. What humans saw as hunting challenges, other species viewed as unstoppable forces of nature. "Paul, when you hunted the void sharks near the Vega system, how did you track creatures that can swim through space?" Amy asked. "Oh, that was tricky," Paul said with obvious enthusiasm. "They leave ion trails in the vacuum, and they always return to the same asteroid fields to rest. We used modified mining equipment to create nets out of charged particles. Took us 3 months to catch our first one, but once we figured out the technique, it became routine." Amy realized she was witnessing something remarkable. Paul was describing the systematic analysis and defeat of creatures that had terrorized space travelers for centuries. He spoke about it the way a farmer might discuss dealing with crop pests, as a problem to be solved through patience and intelligence. The key thing to understand about predators, Paul continued, is that they're actually pretty specialized. They've evolved to be perfect at hunting specific prey in specific environments. When you change the rules of the game, they become vulnerable. Those crystal spiders on Titan? They're nearly invincible in their natural habitat, but they can't handle electrical interference. Simple sonic disruptors confuse their navigation completely. Amy pulled up footage of human mining operations on Titan. The miners worked casually. Among creatures that had killed thousands of ethereal researchers, they wore spider silk clothing and used spider venom as industrial solvents. What had been a source of absolute terror for one species had become a renewable resource for another. Has any creature ever been too dangerous for humans to hunt? Amy asked. Paul thought for a moment. Well, there was this thing on Proxima Centauri b that gave us some trouble. Looked like a cross between a dragon and a nightmare, breathed plasma hot enough to melt steel. Took us 6 months to develop proper heat shields and cooling systems. Lost a few good hunters figuring out its attack patterns. So you gave up? Amy asked hopefully. Give up? Hell no, DOC. We just needed better equipment and more planning. Once we figured out it was sensitive to certain radio frequencies, we could predict its movements. Makes great steaks, by the way. The plasma gives the meat a unique flavor. Amy stared at Paul in amazement. He had just described the systematic hunting of creatures that sounded like mythological demons, and he spoke about it as if it were a normal part of his job. She began to understand why the aliens were so terrified of humanity. Paul, do you realize that every creature you've described as a hunting challenge is considered an unstoppable monster by other species? Amy asked. Paul shrugged again. Maybe they just haven't learned the right techniques yet. Every predator can be out-hot, outmaneuvered, or outgunned if you're willing to put in the effort. That's what humans do. We figure out how to turn disadvantages into advantages. Amy turned off the recording device and sat back in her chair. She finally understood the fundamental difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Other species had developed civilization by avoiding danger and creating safe spaces. Humans had developed civilization by confronting danger and turning it into opportunity. The aliens weren't just afraid of human hunting practices, they were afraid of human nature itself. They had encountered a species that saw their worst nightmares as dinner ingredients, and they had no framework for understanding how such beings could exist. Captain Jake Morrison stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, knowing that humanity's future among the stars depended on his next words. The tension in the great assembly hall was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Representatives from dozens of species watched him with mixtures of fear, curiosity, and barely concealed hostility. Honored council members, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I understand your concerns about humanity's hunting practices, but I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about our nature and our intentions. Council. Leader Zarketh's compound eyes fixed on Jake with unsettling intensity. What misunderstanding could there be, Captain Morrison? Your species actively hunts creatures that have terrorized civilized worlds for millennia. You consume beings that we consider forces of nature itself. Jake took a deep breath before responding. That is exactly the misunderstanding, Council. Leader, you see these creatures as forces of nature, as unstoppable monsters beyond comprehension. We see them as animals, dangerous animals, yes, but still just animals that can be understood, respected, and yes, hunted. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Kael'Vath of the Zephyrians rose from his seat, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in agitated patterns. Captain, you speak of respect, but how can there be respect in hunting creatures for food? Kael'Vath asked, his melodious voice strained with emotion. Because true respect comes from understanding, Jake replied. We don't hunt these creatures carelessly or wastefully. We study them, We learn their behaviors. We understand their place in the ecosystem. We take only what we need and we use every part of what we take." The chamber fell silent as Jake continued. "I propose a demonstration. Allow a small group of your bravest observers to witness a human hunting expedition. Not to participate, but simply to observe. Let them see how we actually interact with these creatures you fear." The suggestion caused an immediate uproar. Representatives began speaking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, colors, and telepathic signals. Some species seemed intrigued by the idea, while others appeared horrified at the mere suggestion. Zia Keth called for order, his mandibles clicking in rapid succession. "This is highly irregular, Captain Morrison. You are asking our people to witness what we consider an act of madness." "I'm asking you to witness an act of understanding," Jake countered. "If you truly want to know what humanity is about, then observe us in our natural element. Judge us by our actions, not by your fears." After hours of debate, a compromise was reached. A small group of volunteer observers would witness a human hunting expedition on Kepler 438c, a moon known for its population of crystal wolves. These creatures were the size of earth tigers but made of living mineral that could slice through steel. They had kept 3 different alien colonies in a state of constant siege for over a century. Lieutenant Kate Foster was chosen to lead the human hunting team. She was a skilled tracker with years of experience hunting dangerous creatures across multiple worlds. Her team included veteran hunter Tom Blake, whose calm demeanor and extensive knowledge of alien ecosystems made him ideal for the demonstration. The volunteer observers were a brave group indeed. There was Dr. Thane Cole, a Zephyrian scientist, who specialized in dangerous fauna. Representative Meshvar of the Threx had volunteered despite her species' natural aversion to risk. Most surprisingly, young Ambassador Silran of the Nalori had insisted on joining, though her blue skin kept shifting to darker shades that indicated extreme nervousness. The expedition assembled on the surface of Kepler 438c in the early morning hours. The moon's landscape was a mixture of crystal formations and metallic soil that reflected the strange light of its binary star system. In the distance, they could see the abandoned structures of the Threx mining colony, empty for decades. Due to crystal wolf attacks. Kate gathered the group around a portable holographic display showing the local terrain. "The crystal wolves are pack hunters," she explained, her voice calm and professional. "They're incredibly intelligent, they can communicate through harmonic frequencies, and their claws can cut through almost any material. They also have excellent hearing and can detect vibrations through the ground from miles away." Dr. Thane Cole's crystalline features seemed to dim with worry. "Lieutenant Foster, if these creatures are so dangerous, how can you possibly hunt them safely?" "By understanding them," Kate replied. "Wolves are social animals, which means they have predictable behaviors. They hunt in patterns, they defend territory, they have social hierarchies. Once you understand those patterns, you can predict their movements." Tom Blake stepped forward, carrying what looked like a modified seismic detector. "We've been monitoring this pack for 3 days, he said, pointing to readings on the device. "They follow the same patrol routes, they rest in the same caves, and they always leave sentries posted while the pack hunts." The alien observers watched in fascination as Kate and Tom explained their hunting strategy. They had identified the pack's alpha female, mapped their territory, and determined the best approach routes. Everything was planned with military precision, but there was also a clear respect for the creatures they were hunting. "The key to hunting crystal wolves," Kate explained, "is to never underestimate them. They're not just mindless predators. They're intelligent, adaptable, and they learn from their mistakes. You have to be smarter than they are, not just stronger." As the team prepared their equipment, Representative Meshvar approached Kate with obvious nervousness. "Lieutenant, my people have lost hundreds of workers to these creatures. How can you be so calm about facing them?" Kate smiled and checked her rifle, a specialized weapon designed to penetrate crystal hide. "Because I understand them, Representative. Fear comes from the unknown. Once you know how a predator thinks, how it moves, how it reacts, it becomes manageable. Still dangerous, but manageable. The hunt began at midday when the crystal wolves were most active. Kate led the team through the crystal formations with practiced stealth, using hand signals to communicate with Tom while staying downwind of their prey. The alien observers followed at a safe distance, their various forms of recording equipment capturing every moment. When they finally encountered the pack, the aliens were struck by the humans' reaction. Instead of fear or aggression, Kate and Tom showed intense focus and respect. They observed the wolves' behavior, noted their pack dynamics, and waited for the perfect moment to act. The hunt itself was swift and clean. Kate and Tom worked together with precision that came from years of experience, taking down the pack's alpha male with shots that killed instantly. The other wolves scattered, but not in panic. They regrouped and began circling, testing the humans' defenses. "They're learning," Tom observed quietly. "See how they're trying different approaches. They're adapting to our tactics." The alien observers watched in amazement as the humans continued to anticipate and counter the wolves' strategies. What had seemed like monsters beyond comprehension now appeared as intelligent animals engaged in a deadly but understandable game of predator and prey. As the hunt concluded, Kate knelt beside the fallen alpha male and placed her hand on its crystal hide. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Your sacrifice will not be wasted." The alien observers stood in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand that humanity's relationship with dangerous creatures was not about domination or cruelty, but about a form of respect that their species had never learned to comprehend. The alien observers were still processing what they had witnessed during the Crystal Wolf hunt when the attack sirens began to wail across Kepler 438c. Lieutenant Kate Foster immediately grabbed her communication device as urgent messages flooded the emergency channels. The voices of panicked ship crews filled the air. REPORTING contacts with unknown hostile vessels approaching the moon's orbit. "All units, this is Captain Morrison aboard the Horizon," came Jake's voice through the static. "We have multiple unidentified ships entering the system. They're broadcasting no identification signals and they're not responding to our hails. All personnel prepare for possible hostile contact." Tom Blake was already scanning the horizon with his enhanced binoculars when he spotted the first signs of trouble. Dark shapes were descending through the atmosphere, moving with the predatory grace of creatures born for war. The ships were organic-looking, covered in what appeared to be chitinous armor, and they pulsed with an evil red light that made the crystal formations around them seem to dim. "Devourers," whispered Dr. Thane Cole, his crystalline form flickering with terror. "By the ancient stars, they're devourers." Representative Meshvar's compound eyes went wide with primal fear. "Impossible. They haven't been seen in this sector for over 50 years. The Devourers don't come this close to civilized space." Kate had never heard of the Devourers, but she could see the absolute terror on the faces of every alien observer. Whatever these creatures were, they represented something far worse than crystal wolves or any other predator the humans had encountered. The aliens were freezing up, their fear so complete that they seemed unable to move or think clearly. "Tom, what's our tactical situation?" Kate asked, her training taking over as she assessed the immediate threats. "Not good," Tom replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Those ships are landing in a standard encirclement pattern. Whatever's inside them, they know how to coordinate attacks. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they reach our position." The first Devourer emerged from the nearest ship, and Kate understood immediately why the aliens were so terrified. The creature stood 8 feet tall, covered in black chitinous plates that seemed to absorb light. Its head was a nightmare of fangs and sensory organs, and its 6 arms ended in claws that could tear through steel. Most disturbing of all, it moved with the fluid grace of a perfect predator, every step calculated and purposeful. "They consume entire worlds," Ambassador Soran whispered, her skin shifting to the deepest blue Kate had ever seen. "They strip planets bare of all life, leaving nothing but empty husks." No species has ever successfully fought them. The only defense is to run and hope they don't follow. Kate watched as more devourers poured from their ships, spreading out in tactical formations that spoke of intelligence and military training. These weren't mindless monsters, they were skilled warriors who had perfected the art of conquest through consumption. The aliens' fear was completely justified, but Kate found herself analyzing the creatures with the same clinical interest she had shown the crystal wolves. "They're apex predators," Kate said, almost to herself, "but they're still predators. They still have to follow the same basic rules as any other hunting species." Tom nodded, already adjusting his equipment for a new type of prey. "Look at their movement patterns. They're confident, maybe overconfident. They expect their prey to run, not to fight back. That gives us an advantage." The alien observers stared at the two humans in disbelief. Dr. Thanecole's voice cracked as he spoke. "Lieutenant Foster, you don't understand. These are the devourers. They've destroyed entire civilizations. They're not animals to be hunted. They're death itself." Kate smiled grimly as she checked her rifle and switched to armor-piercing rounds. "Everything can be hunted, Doctor. The question is whether you're willing to learn how." The first wave of devourers reached their position within minutes, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. The aliens cowered behind the crystal formations, their terror so complete that they couldn't even flee effectively. But Kate and Tom had already positioned themselves in defensive positions, using the terrain to their advantage. When the devourers attacked, they expected to find easy prey. Instead, they found two humans who had spent years learning to hunt the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. Kate's first shot took down the lead devourer with a perfectly placed round that found the weak point, where its chitinous plates joined at the neck. Tom's follow-up shots disabled two more creatures before they could react to the unexpected resistance. "They're surprised," Tom observed, reloading with practiced efficiency. "They've never encountered prey that fights back effectively. Their tactics are based on overwhelming frightened victims, not engaging prepared opponents." The surviving devourers regrouped quickly, but their confidence was shaken. They had expected to face cowering aliens, not skilled human hunters who treated them as just another dangerous species to be studied and defeated. Kate noticed that their formations became more cautious, less aggressive. "They're learning," Kate sighed, echoing Tom's earlier observation about the crystal wolves. "But they're also revealing their patterns. See how they always attack from the flanks? They're programmed to exploit fear, not to handle direct confrontation." As the battle continued, the alien observers began to witness something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's power structures. The devourers, the ultimate predators that had terrorized civilized space for millennia, were being systematically hunted by two humans who treated them as particularly dangerous game animals. Dr. Thanecole watched in amazement as Kate used the same tactics against the devourers that she had used against the crystal wolves. She studied their behavior, anticipated their movements, and exploited their weaknesses with the patience of a skilled hunter. The creatures that had driven entire species to extinction were being outmaneuvered by beings they had never encountered before. "How is this possible?" Representative Meshvar asked, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "The devourers are the apex predators of the galaxy. They're the ultimate hunters." Tom reloaded his rifle and smiled. "They were the ultimate hunters. But they've never met humans before. Every predator thinks it's the top of the food chain until it meets something higher up." The battle turned when Kate realized that the devourers communicated through subsonic frequencies. By using a modified sonic disruptor, she was able to jam their communications and turn their coordination against them. The creatures began to make mistakes, to act independently instead of as a unit. "They're hive-minded," Kate explained to the fascinated aliens. "Disrupt their communication network and they become much less effective, just like any other pack predator." As the last devourer fell, Kate stood over its body with the same respectful gestures she had shown the crystal Volf. "Thank you for the lesson," she said quietly. "You were worthy opponents." The alien observers stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. The Devourers, the nightmare creatures that had haunted galactic civilization for centuries, lay dead at the feet of two humans who had treated them as just another hunting challenge. Dr. Thancole approached Kate with something like reverence in his crystalline eyes. "Lieutenant Foster, do you realize what you've done? You've defeated the Devourers. You've killed the unkillable." Kate shrugged and began cleaning her rifle. "We've killed some dangerous predators, Doctor." "That's what humans do. We find the things that scare everyone else and we figure out how to deal with them." Representative Meshvar's compound eyes reflected the dying light of the Devourer ships. But they were the apex predators of the galaxy. If humans can hunt them, then what does that make humanity? Tom Blake looked up from collecting samples from the fallen creatures and smiled. "I guess that makes us the new apex predators, doesn't it?" The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the Devourer incident on Kepler 438c. The Great Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss what many were calling the most significant event in galactic history. For the first time in recorded memory, the Devourers had been defeated in open combat, and the implications were staggering. Council leader Zarketh stood at the central podium, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of the chamber as he addressed the assembled beings. "Fellow representatives, we gather today to discuss the actions of the human species and their impact on galactic civilization. The evidence before us challenges everything we thought we knew about the nature of predation and survival." Ambassador Kael'Vath of the Zephyrians rose from his seat, his crystalline form catching the light in patterns that seemed more confident than before. "Honored Council Leader, I wish to present a motion that may surprise this assembly. Instead of fearing humanity's nature, I believe we should embrace it." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs and clicks. Representative Meshvar of the Threx, who had witnessed the Devourer battle firsthand, stood to support Kael'Vath's statement. "The ambassador speaks wisdom," she said, her voice carrying across the vast hall. "I have seen humans in action against creatures that have terrorized our species for millennia. They do not hunt from cruelty or madness. They hunt from understanding and necessity." Dr. Thancole, still processing what he had witnessed on Kepler 438c, addressed the assembly with scientific precision. "My analysis of human hunting behavior reveals a species that has evolved a unique relationship with dangerous predators. Where we see unstoppable monsters, they see complex animals that can be understood and managed. This perspective has allowed them to turn our greatest threats into resources." Young Ambassador Silren of the Nilori stood up, her skin shifting to a bright blue that indicated excitement rather than fear. "The humans saved our lives when the Devourers attacked. They faced creatures that our ancestors fled from for generations, and they defeated them using knowledge and strategy. Perhaps it is time to admit that our approach to dangerous predators has been flawed." Captain Jake Morrison listened to the debate with growing hope. The tone of the discussion had shifted dramatically from the fear and suspicion of previous sessions. The aliens were beginning to see humanity not as a threat to be contained, but as a solution to problems they had never been able to solve. Council leader Zarketh called for order and addressed Jake directly. "Captain Morrison, the Council wishes to hear humanity's response to a proposal that has emerged from our discussions. We are considering offering your species a unique role in galactic civilization." Jake stood and approached the speaker's platform, feeling the weight of history in the moment. "The human delegation is honored to hear the Council's proposal. We propose that humanity become the galaxy's apex predator specialists," Zarketh announced. "Your species would be responsible for dealing with dangerous creatures that threaten peaceful civilizations. In exchange, humanity would receive full membership in the Galactic Council and access to our collective knowledge and resources." The proposal was revolutionary. Instead of trying to change human nature or contain it, the Council was offering to officially recognize humanity's unique abilities and give them a purpose that served the greater good. Jake felt a surge of pride as he realized that his species had found their place among the stars. The human delegation accepts this proposal with gratitude and humility, Jake replied. We understand the responsibility that comes with this role, and we pledge to use our abilities to protect all peaceful species in the galaxy. The formal ceremonies that followed marked the beginning of a new era in galactic relations. Humanity was granted not just membership in the Council, but a special status as protectors of peaceful civilizations. Human hunting teams would be deployed to worlds where dangerous predators threatened alien settlements, and human knowledge would be shared to help other species understand and manage their local threats. Chef Maria Santos stood in the kitchen of the first interspecies restaurant, watching as alien customers nervously examined the menu. Her establishment, called the Apex Table, offered carefully prepared dishes made from creatures that had once terrorized galactic civilization. The irony was not lost on her that she was serving devourer steaks to Threx customers, who had fled from these same creatures for generations. The key to preparing devourer meat, Maria explained to her alien sous chef, a young Zephyrian named Valcara, is to respect what the creature was. These weren't just monsters, they were skilled hunters with complex social structures. The meat carries that complexity, and we have to honor it in our preparation. Valcara watched with fascination as Maria demonstrated the proper technique for handling the chitinous portions of the creature. Chef Santos, my people would have nightmares about these creatures. How do you make them into something that brings pleasure instead of fear? Maria smiled as she seasoned the meat with spices from a dozen different worlds. By understanding that fear and respect are not opposites, Valcara. We feared these creatures too, but we also respected them as worthy opponents. When you combine fear with understanding, you get respect. When you add respect to cooking, you get transformation. The restaurant's first customers were brave volunteers from various species who wanted to experience what it felt like to consume their ancestral nightmares. Dr. Thankol was among them, his crystalline form reflecting the warm lights of the dining room as he carefully tasted his first bite of properly prepared crystal volf. It's remarkable, he said, his voice filled with wonder. The fear is gone, replaced by something else. Understanding, perhaps, or acceptance. Captain Jake Morrison had accepted his new role as commander of the Joint Species Defense Force, a military organization that combined human hunting expertise with alien technology and support systems. His flagship, the newly commissioned Starlight Hunter, was a marvel of cooperative engineering that represented the best of both human and alien capabilities. Lieutenant Kate Foster served as his chief tactical officer, leading teams of human hunters who worked alongside alien specialists to protect peaceful worlds from dangerous predators. Her latest mission had taken her to the Outer Rim, where reports of a new type of predator had emerged, creatures that seemed to be a hybrid of known species, possibly created by some unknown force. The beauty of this arrangement, Kate explained to her mixed species team, is that we're not just hunting anymore, we're protecting. Every creature we deal with is one less threat to peaceful civilizations. Every successful hunt makes the galaxy a little safer for everyone. Dr. Amy Parker had established the Galactic Institute for Predator Studies, where human and alien researchers work together to understand dangerous creatures and develop new methods for managing them. Her work had led to breakthroughs in understanding predator behavior that benefited both hunters and prey species. We've learned that the galaxy is full of apex predators, Amy wrote in her latest research report. But we've also learned that there's always room for one more at the top of the food chain. Humanity's gift to the galaxy isn't our technology or our diplomacy. It's our willingness to face the things that everyone else fears and turn them into opportunities for growth and understanding. As the months passed, the relationship between humanity and the galaxy continued to evolve. What had begun as a diplomatic disaster over a dinner had become the foundation for a new form of interspecies cooperation. The aliens learned to appreciate humanity's unique perspective on danger and survival, while humans learned to value the wisdom and knowledge that came from civilizations that had chosen cooperation over confrontation. The galaxy was still full of dangerous creatures, hostile environments, and unknown threats. But for the first time in recorded history, peaceful species could sleep soundly knowing that somewhere among the stars, human hunters were keeping watch, ready to face whatever nightmares the universe might produce and turn them into tomorrow's dinner specials.